Alrighty, alrighty. Hopefully we are now live. Apologies anybody who was waiting for me to go live. We had another presenter in the group, and what I wanted to do was make sure that we didn't overlap. So I've held off. I've been waiting in the wings, really wanting to come and see you all this evening to talk about 11 plus interviews. So hopefully any of you who wanted to come and see me will be able to see me. If you are watching live, I would ask that you put a little hashtag live below so that I know that you're here. And if you're watching on replay, let me know with a hashtag replay as well, so that I can tell that you are here. What I'm going to do is, just for the first minute or so, I just need to make sure that I am there. So you might see me look across the screen. I'm just checking that I am actually live, because sometimes you just talk to yourself and you don't necessarily know that you are there. So it seems to be that I'm there, I am alive, I am there, and people can see me. I think we're good. Okay, and what I'm going to do is perfect. And then let's pop that in there. And I'm just going to tell a couple of other people that I am. Come and see me talk about interviews. There we are. Okay, perfect. Right. So we should be good to go. As I said before, if you can see me, you can hear me, and you know that I am there, please let me know, because otherwise I might be talking to myself. So obviously, this evening is going to be fairly short. I'm going to talk to you about the importance of interviews. I'm going to talk to you about some tips for interviews and some of the things that I am seeing as I start to see students come through. I think the biggest one, and this is having visited schools, this is me having visited and worked with individuals and also worked with masterclass students, is we are seeing students who are maybe a little bit less prepared for speaking with unfamiliar adults. And that makes sense, because we've had the last couple of years, we've been maybe more keeping to ourselves. So we need to maybe get our students more used to talking to other people. And also, again, this is something I've noticed going into schools, is that students seem to be slightly less mature this year. So lots of students who are struggling to look at an interviewer, hold that concentration for 20 minutes. And I know that is something that some of you are concerned about. Some of you have already spoken to me about your child fidgeting or sounding less mature than they are. And that is something that I'll try and cover this evening. So I'm just going to turn my slide over. A little bit about me. I am a 3 times Oxford graduate. I work with schools, I work with individuals in interview preparation, and I have run interview preparation for probably around 4 years now, both one-to-one and in terms of groups, mostly focusing on high independent schools, both scholarships and non-scholarship students. And I am here as an expert on private and grammar school information group. So typically you will hear from me on a Monday. I come in, I give tips for parents usually on a Monday, and my tips are the ones with the black bit at the bottom, so everyone can see them. But yeah, that's a little bit about who I am. And the reason that I'm speaking to you today about interviews, because interviews is one of the things that I do a lot of when it comes to this time. So really, why do schools interview? Well, it depends on the school. And it could be that they're a boarding school. And in a boarding school, they really want to know, how is that child going to work with others? How are they going to be part of a community? How are they going to interact with other children? How are they going to be part of the school community? So that is very much a boarding style interview. But students and schools nowadays are interviewing more and more, especially independents, all the way from 7. So 7+ students do get interviewed, all the way up to 16+. I have, as of this evening, finished an interview session with a 16+ student. I'm going to one of the big Oxford schools, and she is interviewing there this weekend. So they do span quite a lot of ages. And actually, the questions are fairly similar. They're not exact, and the answers that you'd be expected to give are not exact either. But the ones for 11+ are the ones that we're going to focus on this evening. So they want to know, when they're interviewing you, that schools, they want to know that you're the right fit. And that's really the big thing. And I've put here in brackets, look at the website, because the website very clearly states what a school's values are. What do they really pride themselves on? Do they mention their university destinations all over the website? Do they mention their pastoral care? Do they mention their volunteering, their charity work? Because that is what they value. So if they value it, then your child wants to be thinking about times that they've demonstrated it as well. They also want to make sure that a student is what they are on paper and that matches who they are in real life. Because a lot of these schools, and for many independent schools, they might take a pre-test, they might take an actual test. Lots of them have read about a child, they've read school reports, they've read papers, but they haven't necessarily met this child. And so they want to see, do those two things really tally up? And it doesn't matter if a child is nervous, because it is about, it's an interviewer's job really to try and put them at ease. But if you are really nervous and really shy, it's going to be a lot harder for somebody to get an idea about who you are. And that's why we would always say with interviews, it's useful to be familiar, but it is not useful to have a script. And I'll show you why in a little bit. They want to know that your child wants to go to the school, ultimately. That's one of the big things. Do they actually want to go there, or is it, parents, your choice? Because if it is your choice and it's not your child's choice, and they don't have no say in it, and they don't know why they want to go, even if it's a reason that is maybe personal to them, they need to have a reason. It may not be their first choice. We know that. But we want to see, okay, is there a reason that they'd like to come? So as I said, it doesn't have to be their first choice. It might be your first choice. It doesn't have to be theirs. But you do want to know that a child does want to be there. They do know what the school is. I have had students who've come to me for mock interviews and had no idea about the schools they're interviewing for. And that is a bit of a problem, because that shows that they're maybe not going to be that engaged in the school. So once we've worked out what an interview is all about, what's it for, then we can start to consider about preparation. Now, for many people, interviews aren't going to happen until maybe January. I've got lots of people booked in for late December, so I know that you've got independent schools in January, but some of you are having them now. And I've worked with a couple of people in the group, helping them to prep for interviews that are happening this week even. So if you have got time, then you can slowly introduce this for your child, and you can help them to start to speak with new people. You can start to greet people. You can start to talk to people in the supermarket and cashiers, not just random people. But you can start to familiarize themselves with new people. If you've not got that much time, then you can run through some practice interview questions. You can start to make sure that when your child talks about things, that they are mentioning some of the really standout things about their personality, about their hobbies. You can start to remind them about school values, their achievements, things that they might want to talk about in an interview. Night before, have a quick look through the school's website, watch their YouTube videos, make sure that you're familiar with the school, make sure your child knows, oh, that's why I wanted to go there. And then the day of is all about confidence. It's about confidence, but it's also not about putting overconfidence on. So we don't need a big, brash, boastful, kind of overcomplicated individual, but we want a well-mannered student who is confident in their ability. So, they've got a good handshake, they've got a good smile. If they're sitting down, they're not swinging around. And I get a lot of people who do that. So if you are struggling, make sure your child's got both feet firm on the floor. And if they're a bit of a rocker, and you see this quite often in interviews where they do this, not always in online ones, it can be in person too. Just stick the fingertips and make sure that they just tuck them underneath the tops of their legs. It makes it a lot harder for you to move around and to wriggle. So again, just little things that are going to help them to not distract an interviewer, to allow an interviewer to be able to work with them, to be able to talk with them without thinking as an interviewer, that person doesn't want to be here. Because that's what we don't want. We don't want our child walking out of an interview and maybe they haven't mentioned some of the things they're really proud of. Maybe they haven't presented themselves in the best light, because you do typically in an interview only get a one chance. And interview skills are important throughout life, not just in terms of interviews for schools, but as they start to come towards jobs, as they start to come towards maybe forming their own business, networking, these skills that they are doing, they're important. So these are all of the things that we are hoping to familiarize a student with when we're preparing. Typical common areas of struggle. And these are things that I see. I've got in front of me actually a notes that I have taken from previous students' interviews. One-word answers, although mostly we can get at least a sentence. Students who maybe they've learnt some of it, and so they will be able to tell me the first part, and then this happens. So I would maybe ask them, and so tell me about one of your hobbies. What do you do after school? On a Wednesday, I go swimming. My favorite stroke is the backstroke. And then I'll go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, tell me why you like the backstroke. And they just freeze. And so that is a really typical thing that I get with a student. And it's where they've learnt, so they have robotically learnt the first part, but they've not considered the second part. So really, when we work with students, we talk about conversation. We don't talk about robotic learning. Another really key one is students who are a little bit nervous, and then they tend to rush their speech and they sound like this. And then they'll sit there for a little while whilst the interviewer tries to work out what they've just said. We get students who don't necessarily know what to say. And so you get lots of, I'm not sure. And at that point, again, as an interviewer, it's very hard to get ideas out of a student. So one of the big things that I want you to take away from today is that there is no right answer in an interview. There are answers that sound nicer. There are answers that showcase a child in a better light, but there is no wrong answer. So not being able to think of an answer, it's sometimes better if you try it and give it a go. I would much rather have a student who says to me, I'm not sure, but, and then they go on a completely wrong tangent because they've given it a go. And often that links back to a school's values. School's values are always going to be that they want somebody who gives it a go. They want perseverance. So if you can't think of an answer, give it a go. Body language is hard to work with a student on because it's not a quick fix. But as I said, simple things like sitting up straight, tucking the fingers underneath the legs so that you can't fiddle, you can't fling your arms everywhere, looking straight at the interviewer, not down at the table so that all we can see is the top of your head. All those things make it a little bit easier to communicate. So those are some of the really common things that I'm picking up this year. Some of the things that I think is worth knowing is that you might end up, if you are parents, you might end up as a parents tour. There's quite a lot of parent tours going on this year. And just noting that as a parent, you're not being interviewed as such. You can get parent interviews for certain boarding schools, but they do want to know that you are going to be involved in your child's education. So do not, whilst you're on the interview as a parent, take a phone call, for example, as it shows the school that they're not your priority. So if you can, make sure work calls are diverted, try and stick that out of office on, even if it's just a 30-minute. Or if you have to take a work call, if it's something that's really urgent, then I would go to the side and maybe go out into a quad or a garden, or indeed, if you know that you have to take that work call, tell the person who's showing you round first, by the way, I'm really keen to do this tour, but I know that I've got a work call. If my phone goes, what should I do? And they'll probably say head back to reception. They might have to accompany you because you're unsupervised as an adult in a school, but they might therefore be able to put something in place. What you don't want to do is take it in the middle of a tour group and disrupt everybody else. Something occasionally, I'd put this a little bit further down because I haven't had so many people do this year. But if you have school terminology and you are filling out an independent school form, often it happens just before you send a child into interviews, don't use acronyms. If they do WJC, actually that's an example. If they do something that has got an acronym and you know what it is, don't assume that the school will. So if they, there we are, if they race Aspies, which I think is a type of sailing boat, don't then tell them that that's what it is. Tell them that they race sailing boats. I work with a national sailor and she's continually using acronyms and I have no idea what she's talking about. She has to always take the acronyms out. So if you know your child does a sport where there's lots and lots of different acronyms, then please do, when you're writing down what they do and when they're talking about what they do, make sure you take the acronyms out. And then we've got confident but not braggy. And that's a really hard thing to do. And this is what I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about this evening. So in terms of interview question, I believe that there's about 12 different types. 5 of the common ones are written down here. And it's these 5 that I'm going to focus on for the rest of today. The big one is on hobbies. And it's often where students struggle because they've either got loads of hobbies or they've got 1 or 2 hobbies. And either way, either end, they struggle a little bit to be able to put that across. So I've written a whole slide on how to put forward your hobbies, but not to brag about your hobbies. So remember, you have only about 20 minutes. Your child has only about 20 minutes to do this interview. Might go on a bit longer, might be a bit shorter. You know, it's less known. But if you've got 20 minutes, you've got to try and fit as much in as possible. So something that I find helps with students, and the reason why I thought I'd put this forward is lots and lots of my students are really struggling this year on this particular area, which is they've got hobbies, but they're struggling to work out how to present them. Maybe they are really, really good at chess, or they're really good at swimming, or they've recently just taken up rugby, but it turns out that they are really good at it and they're loving it and they're getting promoted. Now, they're worried. They're worried that if they say, I won my rugby match, or I've been promoted to this league, that they're going to sound like they're boasting. And so one of the things that I've worked on quite a lot with students this year is about how to put your hobbies forward, but not brag, and how to avoid the whole rabbit in headlights moment. Because if your child has a hobby and it's a hobby that I'm interested in, I'm likely to ask them lots of questions about that hobby. And if they've told me they're really interested in it, but then they can't tell me anything about it, I'm going to start to get a little bit confused as an interviewer. I'll make my way around it. But when somebody says to me, I'm really interested in World War II, and then they can't tell me who the Prime Minister was in World War II, I'm starting to think maybe they're not that interested and maybe they've been asked to say that. So when you're going through a child's interest, a child's hobbies, I've written you a little checklist. Why they enjoy it. What bit do they like? Do they like meeting their friends there? Do they like the skills that they learn? Do they like the fact that they get to play games? Do they like the fact that they're active, that they're in a team? What do they like about it? Then what skills have they learnt? So that could be something that is a particular skill. Someone told me about chess. There is a particular pincer or pinch movement. I don't play chess, so I don't know the movements, but they were able to explain it to me, and they could explain what this movement was and why they would use it. That's a perfectly great thing. I can learn all about that. So what kind of skills does it offer? And then I start to consider other things around it. Imagine it like a big mind map. Time that you made a mistake and how you learned from it. Okay, so do you play football when you're the goalkeeper and you kept assuming that they were always going to go one way, and actually you've learned about the feint, and you know that now you can look at their feet and you can work out where they're going. Is that something that you've learned from it? Have you made a mistake? Maybe you lost a game because of it, but now you've learned from it. What are you doing right now in it? Are you learning skills? Are you playing games? Are you competing? What do you do in that hobby, in that interest all the time? Who you do it with? Do you do it with friends? Do you do it on your own? Tell me about that. When do you do it? Is it after school? Is it at the weekend? Again, when we ask you as a student, we ask a student for after school activities, if you tell me something you do at the weekend, I'm fine with that, because you can say to me, I don't really do much in the week because I have to pick my little sister up from school, but at the weekend and that's just conversation. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to have that. So don't worry if your child doesn't do anything during the week because you work as a parent, you can't take them certain places, but they do something at the weekend, then tell me that. So don't worry, because remember we said there is no one answer. So when you do it, what are you most proud of? Did you make an amazing painting? Someone once told me they made a really good painting of a flamingo. It was an abstract painting, but you could definitely tell it was a flamingo. And I interviewed this student months ago, and I can still remember that answer because they offered it to me. I didn't even ask really much about it. They were telling me about art classes and how they did it with their friend. And I remember this because they could tell me all about this flamingo because they were proud of it. And so they could say to me, this is something I'm really proud of. I really like doing it. And it's something I think I'm good at. And it allowed us to have that conversation to make that connection. And again, what do you think you could improve? So is there something that your child thinks they need to work on? Again, those are the types of things that can help. So I've written a little paragraph just to help children who are maybe struggling with putting your hobbies forward. You're worried about it being boastful. So here I've got, I play chess competitively. I really enjoy it because it makes me think logically, how it makes me think logically. I've won the last 2 competitions that I went to. And this made me really proud, especially since during the second one, I used this particular movement that my coach taught me in summer. Now, that is not boastful. You have not gone in and just said, I do chess and I win all the games. You've told me all about what you do. You've told me that you play it competitively. You told me why it's enjoyable. You've told me how you won. So you've told me loads of information. And yes, you've told me that you won 2 games, but that has more background to it. So in terms of putting forward your hobbies, and I've seen some really great hobbies, but you don't want to brag, that's the type of thing that we're looking at. Now, if on the other end, you don't have many hobbies, you maybe just started because you've taken a break and it's been 11 plus, and actually your child's not necessarily done loads of stuff. And actually now you've come to the interview part, you're struggling to try and work out, how do I make football that I joined 4 weeks ago sound like it's going to take a lot of time? Or how am I going to fill that hobby space? It's the exact same technique. So again, If you go through why you enjoy it, what skills it's offered, how you got into it, why you took it up, then you've got a whole story for me. I didn't do many hobbies. I didn't do many after school activities for the last 2 years because it's been COVID, and then I've been preparing for my 11 plus. However, last month, my mum signed me up to a football club, and so far I've really enjoyed it. I think I really like playing defense because I like the fact that you have to work out where the attacker's going. And we play football matches every weekend, and I'm doing my first one this weekend. Suddenly, you've gone from I play football and I started it 4 weeks ago to widening, having a story, being able to put those ideas forward. So hopefully this is one of the big areas, the big bottlenecks that I'm finding with a lot of my students at the moment. And hopefully this bit of today, of this evening, helps. So other things that you might want to think about. You might want to think about highlighting the school values. As I said, during those discussions that you're having about those hobbies, think about the school values. Think about your values. Is it important to you as a family to be honest? Is it important to you as a family to, work in teams? Is it important to you to be able to compete in something? Think about what your values are and what the school's are. School-specific questions. And for school-specific questions, I would always promote the fact that your child's answer, parents, are not your answers. So when I ask some students, why do you want to come to X school? Why would you like to go there? They often tell me about the academics. So they often say it was a very academically good school. It's been here in the league tables. That's not the reason that they want to go. It's not the sole reason they want to go. It might be one of the reasons, but it's not the sole reason. So I would always think about what do they want to do when they're there. Most students don't pick a school just because of its academics. You might pick it because it's got swimming pool. Might be one of the reasons. And also one of the reasons why, even if it's not your child's ideal school, so it's not the one that they necessarily wanted, it's the one that you would like them to have an attempt at, there's going to be something that they like in it. So if on the open day they saw the food tech department looks really fun, then tell me that. Tell me that it's academic and that you like the academics, you want to be surrounded by people who, enjoy that, but also tell me about the food tech, because everyone I hear talks about the academics. Absolutely everyone says, I want to go to the school because everyone's really academic and because it's got great grades and because it's league tables, and all of that's the same. But if you as a student, so a child in front of me says, I've chosen the school because it's got great GCSE results or it's got great grades, but also when I turned up to the open day, I was shown around by someone who I thought was really friendly. And when they took me to the history department, I was really impressed because everybody there, all the books that I looked at, they were all full of really interesting source work, and I could see the models that you made. Wow, okay, now I can have that conversation. I can have a whole conversation about history because this child clearly likes history. I can probably spend 20 minutes on history if I really want to. So it's about opening up. And so do make sure that it's your child's answer, not just your answer. Other things that tend to throw a child off are really broad questions, like, tell me about your current school. They don't necessarily know what I'm trying to ask. And that's because it is a very broad question. But things that I'd like to know about a current school is maybe what you like studying there, how far away it is, how you get there. Often, I'm using this as a springboard to ask you another question. So tell me about your current school. Okay. I hear that you get in the car with mum and you drop your brother off first. Where does your brother go to school? I'm just trying to make a conversation. But sometimes that floors students because they're not sure what we want. And often we don't. We want just the startings of a conversation. But often that might come from, the next question might be then, so what's your favourite subject in this school? Why do you like going to this school? Those are the types of things that I would follow it up with. At school, are you reading any book at the moment? Tell me what you're doing in English. Those are all the types of questions that might come from just tell me about your current school. Same open things. Tell me about a current event that interests you. It depends on where you go as to how I'm going to respond to that. So school-specific questions, make sure that your child is answering, but also make sure that you've discussed it as a family. As you know from above, I don't recommend that you script an answer, because that usually ends up with the first line being scripted and then they panic and they don't necessarily know what's going to happen when I ask a further question. But do have that discussion, because it helps them to work out why they've chosen the school. They might have chosen that school several years ago. You might have chosen that school and then they turned up to the open day. And if that's the case, then what did they like at the open day? And that's going to be one of the reasons that they maybe want to go. Avoiding the negative. Again, this is a new slide for this year. Often when you are doing an interview, and we know this as adults, we don't want to put the negative side of us forwards. But often children are very honest and they will tell me all of the negative stuff and they won't necessarily tell me the positive stuff. And so the first is about not necessarily opening up the negative. Try rephrasing some of the things. If you're bored in your current school, phrase it as, I'd like to go to this school because it's more challenging. I like difficult problems. If you don't like a teacher, phrase it as, I prefer this teacher because of this reason. I really like this teacher because. If you had a hobby but you stopped doing it because you didn't want to do it anymore, don't necessarily tell me, well, I got to grade 3 in violin and then I stopped because I wasn't very good at it. Tell me I got to grade 3 in violin and I took the knowledge that I learnt from violin and I decided to start guitar. Or I decided that violin wasn't my instrument, but I really enjoyed playing this particular piece. So always think about turning it around to the positive. Sometimes you can't get away from the negative, because some interviewers will ask a negative question. What's your least favourite subject at school? Tell me about a time that you had an argument with somebody. So we're digging for the negative. And when we do that, I have a 3-point rule. Honest, however, positive. So first of all, my least favourite subject is probably history. Honest. I'm not going around saying, nope, I don't have any of them. I'm not saying, oh, well, one of my least favourite subjects is math and I happen to be the best at it, because that's not going to be very truthful. Interviews are all about truth. But we're honest. And then we've got the however, and then tell me something positive about that. So my least favourite subject is probably history, because there's lots of dates to remember. However, currently we're doing the Black Death, and I really enjoy learning about all of the stories. Okay, so you've ended on a positive. Or I really like learning about diseases that people got. It doesn't matter what the positive is, but you can tell me something positive at the end. Honest, however, positive. And always, if you can think honest, however, positive, you're always going to show that you can find the positive in something that is a little bit negative. So again, if I had an argument example, I did have an argument with my sister. We were arguing about what to play on board game night. She really wanted to play Uno and I really wanted to play Guess Who. And Mum said that she had to choose because I'd chosen the last time. However, I got to choose what snack we had. So then you've got something, you've got a resolution, you've got something positive. Or however, my sister and I sat down and we decided that we'd spend half an hour playing Uno and half an hour playing Guess Who. There's a positive resolution. We don't want So me and my sister had a screaming match and we both ran to the other end of the house, because that's negative. We want something that ends in a positive. Then we get tell me an example questions. Tell me an example questions are probably one of the hardest for a student to prepare and to think about, just because these are adult style interview questions. Tell me an example of when you've struggled with something. Tell me of how you had a disagreement. Tell me of when you worked in a team, when you've led a team. These are hard things to do. And typically you'll find them in the highly selective schools, and you'll find them in scholarships. You'll find them in 13 plus. You may not find them in some of the less selective independents, but they are still worth considering. And to try and avoid a one-word answer, we want to consider STAR. I've talked probably about STAR before, but it is a really useful framework, and you want to make sure that you aren't just saying part of a story. Remember that the interviewer is not in your child's head, so they can't work out where your child was when this happened. They can't work out the ending. They can't just pick out bits and go, oh, that's when they did this. We have no idea. So S stands for situation. When was it? What was going on? So in school, in year 5, we had a history project to produce a poster about a famous person. Situation. Task. What were you doing? We were put into groups of 5, and my group chose to do a poster on Winston Churchill. So there's our task. A, action, is all about you. I did all the drawings, or I made sure that everybody went away and did all the research, and then we came back and we did all the posters together. Or I was in charge of the timeline of Winston Churchill's life. R, result. Result does not have to be big. You don't have to win a poster competition. You don't have to have the best poster in the world. You don't have to go to a headmaster for a commendation. You don't have to do any of that. You could just be very proud of it. You could have just worked together well as a team. But tell me an ending so I know it's an end. Because sometimes someone says to me, oh, we were in year 5, we got this history project, and we were in a group of 5 people, and I was in charge of doing the timeline of Winston Churchill, who was the historical figure that we'd chosen. And I'm like, and what's next? So let me know that it's finished. We did a really great poster. We were really proud of it. And our teacher gave us +1. Okay. So our teacher gave us a merit. The teacher said that we'd done a good job. So make sure that you are ending that story. As I said, it doesn't have to be a big result. It doesn't have to be like stupendous, amazing. It really is just something that is finishing it. Let me know. Let me know that you finished. Otherwise, I'm sitting there like, are we going to speak? I don't know. So make sure that the interviewer knows that you're finished. And again, we've got there honest, passionate, positive, memorable. Those are how we'd like the stories to be. So no dishonest stories, no climbing Everest unless you did that. No things which ended really well even when they didn't. Perfectly fine to have a result where it didn't end all that well. We want something that was passionate. So we want something that you are clearly excited to tell me, that you are interested in. No point going, oh, we did this project. Yeah, it was in history. Yeah, it was about Winston Churchill. Don't want any of that. I want some eye contact. I want you to be positive and interesting about it. When I say positive, as I said, it doesn't have to be that you won the football match. It doesn't have to be that you were the best poster. It just has to be that you got something positive from it. Although we lost the football match and we lost 3-0, it still was something that we did really well, because I think we all played together really well as a team. Positive. Doesn't matter that you didn't win. And then memorable. There's no point giving me something that's waffly and that I don't understand what's happening. because that means I can't remember it. So if you say, oh, well, I did this project and there was 3 of us, and once we built our structure, we needed to present it and we got 2nd place. I have no idea what you're talking about. So that's why we try and stick to STAR, because that's going to help your child to put a bit more structure into the way that they learn and the way that they're explaining. Sorry. Then we've got probably the most fun questions, the ones that I like doing the most, which are our creative and critical thinkings. So, as I've said previously, there is no right or wrong answer in interviews. But these are some really fun ones for which there is definitely no right or wrong answer. Is there life on other planets? It doesn't matter what way you go, but you just have to tell me how you think. I want to see what your ideas are. Tell me about this poem. Tell me what it could mean. Tell me how the author's thinking. Tell me what the artist is thinking. Is it okay to throw a bottle into the sea? Does it count as littering, or does it count as something else? I want to see how a student thinks, and that means communicating what's going on in your head. So if somebody says, if you could throw a bottle into the sea, is it littering? And you're thinking, yeah, it is littering, but maybe there's a message in that bottle. I want to know that as an interviewer. So tell me out loud. Tell me that is what you are thinking. So, okay, so first of all, I'm thinking, yes, that probably does sound like littering, but maybe if you're using it to communicate, it's not. I want to know what you're thinking, and that is why I want to hear your thoughts. And it's perfectly fine if you disagree with your thoughts. So maybe you started off thinking something, and then something's come up and you thought, no, maybe I don't agree with that anymore. But do communicate. Do a whole piece on why creative writing and critical thinking when I do workshops. And it's sometimes the hardest part for students because they're not used to having this free thought where they're allowed to come up with any idea that they want. And sometimes they just go all over the place. So we do need to structure it, but we also need to make sure that that you are critically answering the question and you are coming up with ideas. Current affairs. What have you read in the news? Again, it doesn't have to be the most newsworthy article. It doesn't have to be the most technical. You don't have to tell me about the economy of the UK. You can tell me something that they read in the week or watched on Newsround. And that is probably where I would expect most people would tell me about news, because that's usually where they get the news from. So it just has to be something that's interesting, something that you can talk about, something that is related to interests, but not something that you can only explain in one line. So if in the morning your child watches the news and just before their interview they see something and they go, oh, that's the thing I'm going to think about, I would try and maybe urge them towards something that you may have pre-discussed or something that they can explain, because sometimes it can appear on the news and we might not be certain on it. So how long ago? We had a petrol crisis back in September? Earlier than that. Can't remember when. A couple of months ago. When we had the petrol crisis, there were big queues. Somebody told me, and this was an interview prep that I was doing with an 11 plus student, and they were due to have, actually I think it was 12 plus, and they were due to have an out of entrance exam and interview. And they said to me, I saw on the news this morning that cars were queuing up near petrol stations. I said, okay, tell me why you think that is. And they said, petrol's gone up in price. I said, okay, why do you think that might be? And they had no idea. All they could tell me was the headline that they'd seen on the paper, the news in this case. And they had seen that there was lots and lots of queues, and their mum, on the way to the interview, had got stuck in a petrol queue. So they knew that petrol prices had gone up because that's what mum had said in the car, but they had no idea anything else. No idea why, no idea of anything else. So do make sure that even if they are not and they're not going to be able to explain the whole UK economy and the crisis in Ukraine, all of that stuff. But if you can say slightly more about something that you read in the week or something that you've seen on Newsround, then those are the topics that I would go for, rather than trying to say a topic that is maybe more adult, but you don't understand as clearly. So I would much rather hear something from the week than I would hear something from BBC that maybe isn't understood fully. So if you're going to go for a news question, and they do come up a fair bit for independence, then do explain it beyond one line. You can talk about it. Okie dokes. Right, so we are at the end of the live. I want to say thank you ever so much to Deep and to everyone who is in the group, who has supported us, who lets us know that we are that everyone is here, and Deep, who has, I think, been listening. Yay, good, and has been making sure that I'm speaking and everyone can hear me. As I said before, please do let us know in terms of #live or #replay that you have been listening, because I would love to know. And if you've got questions, do pop them down as well. In terms of support from me, if you're watching this and thinking, I could probably do with some support, then I do run interview masterclasses. I run one-to-one interviews. I run a session on the group task, and the name that you might want to look up, which is my education company, is the Education Hotel. But really, in terms of practice, a lot of it is discussion. So do feel free to go through this presentation, pause, watch it on replay, and make sure that you have discussed these topics with your child and that they are confident they know what's coming up in an interview. So again, once again, everyone, thank you ever so much for tuning in. I'm going to bid you good night because it's getting kind of late, and I should probably stop talking. All right, then I will speak to you soon, and bye-bye.